The rain-soaked streets of downtown reflected the neon lights as taxi driver James Thompson pulled over for what he thought was just another late-night pickup. But when the woman in the torn designer wedding dress climbed into his backseat, trembling and clutching a medical bag, he had no idea his world was about to change forever. Hit that like button if you've ever had a moment that made you question everything you thought you knew about fate. This wasn't just any runaway bride fleeing a $50 million wedding. This was Dr. Sophia Romano, the brilliant heart surgeon who had saved his 8-year-old daughter's life just 6 months earlier. The same woman who had given his little girl a second chance at life was now begging him for one of her own. Started as a simple taxi ride through the streets of Millbrook Heights would become a journey that would test everything James believed about loyalty, love, and the price of freedom. Because sometimes the person who saves your family needs you to save them right back. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The yellow taxi's windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the October downpour as James Thompson navigated through the upscale district of Millbrook Heights at nearly midnight. His radio crackled with dispatch calls, but James was hoping for just one more fare before calling it a night. He needed every dollar he could get. The medical bills from Emma's surgery 6 months ago still arrived with depressing regularity. Despite the insurance coverage, that's when he saw her. A figure in white stumbled along Windsor Avenue, one of the most exclusive streets in the city. As his headlights swept across her, James realized she was wearing what appeared to be a wedding dress, an elaborate, expensive-looking gown that was now torn and muddy at the hem. She was clutching something against her chest and looking over her shoulder as if being pursued. James had been driving a taxi for 8 years, ever since Emma was born, and he'd needed flexible work that allowed him to be present for her medical appointments. He'd learned to read people quickly, to distinguish between those who needed help and those who might cause trouble. This woman looked desperate, not dangerous. He slowed the taxi and rolled down his window. The woman turned toward him, and in the glow of the streetlights, he could see her face clearly for the first time. His breath caught in his throat. It was Dr. Sophia Romano. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. This was the woman who had spent 14 hours in an operating room saving his daughter's life when Emma's congenital heart defect had suddenly worsened. The brilliant cardiovascular surgeon who had explained the procedure to him with such patience and compassion, who had stayed by Emma's bedside during those terrifying first hours after surgery, who had quite literally given his daughter a future. And now she was standing in the rain in a wedding dress, looking utterly lost. "Dr. Romano?" He called out through the window, his voice barely audible over the storm. She froze, then stepped closer to the taxi, squinting through the rain. Her dark hair, which he remembered as always being perfectly styled during their hospital encounters, now hung in wet strands around her face. Her makeup was smeared, and there was something almost broken in her usually confident demeanor. "James?" she said, recognition dawning in her voice. "Emma's father?" He nodded, studying her face with concern. "What are you doing out here? Are you okay?" Dr. Romano Sophia looked around nervously, as if checking for something or someone. I'm fine, I just ... She gestured helplessly at her wedding dress. "This is going to sound crazy." "Try me," James said, putting the taxi in park. "After what Emma and I have been through, nothing sounds crazy anymore." She approached the passenger side window, and he could see she was shivering despite the mild October evening. "I ran away from my own wedding," she said quietly. "About 2 hours ago. I just ... I couldn't do it." James took in the expensive gown, the elaborate beadwork that caught the streetlight like tiny stars, the torn hem that spoke of desperate running. "Where are you trying to get to?" "I don't know," she admitted, and for the first time since he'd known her, the confident surgeon sounded uncertain. "I don't actually have anywhere to go." I gave up my apartment when I moved in with Richard 6 months ago, and I can't go back there. My parents ... She shook her head. They're the ones who arranged this whole thing. James remembered reading about Dr. Romano's engagement in the society pages that Emma's grandmother had shown him. A wealthy real estate mogul named Richard Ashford. A wedding that was described as the social event of the season. $50 million worth of flowers, entertainment, and exclusivity. "Get in," he said, unlocking the doors. "We'll figure it out." Sophia hesitated for a moment, then quickly climbed into the back seat. As she settled in, James could see she was clutching a small medical bag, the same one he'd seen her carry during Emma's hospital stay. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is weird, and I don't want to put you in an awkward position. You probably have somewhere to be." "Actually, I was just finishing my shift," James said, pulling away from the curb. "Emma's at her grandmother's house tonight, so I'm in no hurry." He watched her in the rearview mirror as she tried to arrange the voluminous skirt of her dress in the small space. The contrast was surreal. This woman who had commanded an entire surgical team with quiet authority, who had made life and death decisions with steady hands, now looking vulnerable and displaced. "How is Emma doing?" Sophia asked, and despite her own crisis, there was genuine care in her voice. "She's incredible," James said, feeling the familiar warmth that always came when talking about his daughter. "The surgery was a complete success. Her cardiologist says her heart function is better than it's ever been. She's been able to play soccer for the first time in her life, and she's constantly running everywhere. You gave her the childhood I was afraid she'd never have." In the mirror, he saw Sophia's eyes fill with tears. "That's wonderful. She's such a special little girl. I remember how brave she was, even when she was scared. She asked about you for weeks after the surgery." James continued. "She wanted to send you thank you cards, draw you pictures. The nurses said you don't usually follow up with patients once they're discharged, but you stopped by her room every day until she went home. She reminded me why I became a surgeon in the first place," Sophia said softly. "Before all the politics and hospital administration and..." She gestured at her dress. "Before I forgot that medicine is supposed to be about healing people, not advancing careers." James drove slowly through the empty streets, unsure of where to go. The rain was letting up, but Sophia still looked like she was in shock. "What happened tonight?" he asked gently. "If you don't mind me asking." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the passing city lights. "I was standing at the altar, looking at Richard, and I realized I didn't recognize my own life anymore. The wedding had 400 guests, most of whom I'd never met. The dress cost more than most people make in a year. The flowers were flown in from 3 different countries. And all I could think about was how none of it felt real." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "Richard is a good man, in his way. Successful, respected, everything my parents wanted for me. But he sees me as an acquisition, the brilliant surgeon wife who'll look perfect at charity galas and business dinners. He doesn't understand why I work such long hours, why I choose the difficult cases that don't pay as well. He thinks surgery is just a hobby I'll give up once we start having a family." "But surgery isn't a hobby for you," James said, understanding beginning to dawn. "It's who I am," she said firmly. "It's the only time I feel completely myself, when I'm in that operating room, when I know that everything I do matters. I've spent 12 years training to save lives. I can't just stop because it's inconvenient for someone else's vision of our future." James found himself driving toward his neighborhood without really deciding to. It was a modest area, working-class families in small houses with tiny yards, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and helped each other out. Nothing like the exclusive enclaves where Dr. Romano usually moved. "Where are we going?" she asked, noticing the change in scenery. "My house," James said, then quickly added, I mean, if that's okay with you. You need somewhere safe to figure out your next move, and I owe you more than I could ever repay. Emma's at her grandmother's tonight, so you'd have privacy to think. James, I couldn't impose like that. You barely know me outside of the hospital. I know enough, he said firmly. I know you spent your entire Sunday afternoon explaining heart surgery to an 8-year-old girl in terms she could understand because you could see she was scared. I know you stayed late every night of her hospital stay to check on her personally. I know you care more about your patients than your own comfort. That's enough for me. As they pulled into his driveway, James felt a strange sense of coming full circle. 6 months ago, this woman had welcomed his daughter into her care without question, had treated Emma with skill and compassion that had saved her life. Now she needed sanctuary, and he could offer her the same unconditional support she had given them. "Welcome to our home," he said, turning off the engine. "It's not much, but it's safe, and nobody will find you here unless you want them to." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophia sat in the back seat for a moment, looking at the small house with its modest front porch and the taxi parked in a narrow driveway. Everything about the scene was the opposite of the world she'd been living in. No gates, no security cameras, no manicured lawns. Just a simple home with warm light glowing from the windows and a child's bicycle leaning against the front steps. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, though James could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "I don't want to cause problems for you. If Richard finds out where I am ... Let me worry about that," James said, getting out of the taxi and coming around to open her door. "The most important thing right now is getting you somewhere warm and dry." As Sophia stepped out of the car, the full absurdity of the situation hit her. Here she was, still in her designer wedding gown, about to enter the home of a taxi driver whose daughter she'd operated on. 6 hours ago, she'd been in a luxury suite at the Grand Millbrook Hotel, surrounded by attendants making final adjustments to her veil. Now she was standing in a working-class neighborhood with mud on her shoes and her carefully planned life in ruins. "I can pay you," she said suddenly, "for the ride, for letting me stay here. I have money in my medical bag. I always keep emergency cash." James paused at his front door, key in hand. "Dr. Romano, when Emma was in the hospital, did you ever send me a bill for all those extra visits? For staying late to check on her? For explaining every detail of her care so I could understand what was happening?" "Of course not," Sophia said. "That was just good patient care." "Well, this is just good human care," James replied simply, opening the door. "Sometimes people help each other because it's the right thing to do, not because there's a transaction involved." The interior of the house was warm and lived in, with comfortable furniture that showed wear, but also care. Family photos lined the mantelpiece. James and Emma at various ages, an older woman who must be Emma's grandmother, candid shots of birthday parties and holidays. It was the kind of home that felt like a hug, completely different from the sterile perfection of the penthouse she'd shared with Richard. "Coffee?" James asked, hanging his keys on a hook by the door. "Or tea? I think I have some chamomile somewhere." "Coffee would be perfect," Sophia said, then looked down at her elaborate dress. "Is there somewhere I could—" "This dress weighs about 20 pounds when it's dry, and now it's soaked through." "Of course," James said, already heading toward a hallway. "Let me grab you something to change into." He returned a few minutes later with an armload of clothes. "These were my wife's," he said quietly. "She passed away 4 years ago, but I kept some of her things. You're about the same size, I think." Sophia accepted the clothes with gentle hands, understanding the significance of the gesture. "Thank you, that's very generous. Bathrooms down the hall, first door on the right, take your time." When Sophia emerged 20 minutes later, she was transformed. Gone was the elaborate wedding gown, replaced by soft jeans and a comfortable sweater in deep blue. Her hair was damp but clean, her face scrubbed free of makeup. She looked younger, more like the medical student James imagined she must have been years ago. "Better?" she asked, carrying the folded wedding dress. "You look like yourself," James said, handing her a steaming mug of coffee. "Instead of like someone playing dress-up." They settled in the living room, Sophia curled up on one end of the couch while James took the armchair. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but James could see her processing everything that had happened. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said finally. "How did you do it? Raise Emma alone after your wife died? Handle all the medical crises and work and everything?" James considered the question, wrapping his hands around his own coffee mug. "Honestly, some days I didn't handle it well at all. There were nights when Emma was little and sick, and I had no idea what I was doing. I made mistakes, probably more than I should have, but you kept going. What choice did I have? Emma needed me. And I guess I learned that being a good parent isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, even when you're scared out of your mind." He paused. "Like tonight with you. I don't know what I'm doing here either, but you needed help, and I could provide it." Sophia smiled for the first time since getting in the taxi. "You know, in all my years of medical training, no one ever taught me how to handle personal crises. I can stay calm in an operating room when someone's life is hanging in the balance. But ask me to make a decision about my own life, and apparently I run away in a wedding dress." "Running away isn't always a bad thing," James said. "Sometimes it's the only way to get perspective on what you really want." "What I really want," Sophia repeated softly. "I'm not sure I even know anymore. For so long, I've been focused on becoming the best surgeon I could be, and then on being what Richard wanted me to be. Somewhere along the way, I lost track of what I actually wanted for myself." "Well, you have time to figure it out now," James said. "No one's going to find you here, and you can stay as long as you need. Why are you being so kind to me?" Sophia asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice. "I know you're grateful for Emma's surgery, but this goes beyond gratitude." James was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something he wasn't sure he fully understood himself. "Do you remember, during Emma's surgery, when you came out to the waiting room to give me updates? It was the middle of the night. You'd been operating for hours, but you sat down and explained everything that was happening. You drew diagrams on a napkin so I could understand the procedure." Sophia nodded. "At one point I asked you why you were taking so much time to explain everything when you could have just said the surgery is going well, and you said that fear thrives in the dark, but understanding brings light. You said that as Emma's father, I had a right to understand what was happening to my daughter, even if it took extra time." "I remember that," Sophia said softly. "Tonight, you're the one who's afraid and in the dark," James continued. "You've been living someone else's vision of your life for so long that you've lost sight of your own path. Maybe what you need is time and space to find that light again." Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "That's probably the most insightful thing anyone said to me in months. Richard's always telling me what I should want, what I should do, how I should feel. He never asks what I actually think. That must be exhausting." "It is," she admitted. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for 6 months, trying to be the person he wanted me to be. Tonight, standing at that altar, I realized I was about to sign up for a lifetime of holding my breath." James reached over and turned on a small lamp, casting a warm glow across the room. "Well, you can breathe here. No expectations, no pressure. Just space to figure out what comes next." For the first time in months, Sophia felt her shoulders relax. "Thank you, James, for the ride, for the sanctuary, for not asking a million questions about why I ran. Everyone deserves the chance to choose their own life," he said simply. "Even brilliant surgeons who sometimes forget they're human too." They talked until nearly 3 in the morning, sharing stories and silences in equal measure. Sophia found herself opening up about things she'd never discussed with anyone: her fears about losing herself in marriage, the pressure from her parents to settle down, the way her medical career had both fulfilled and isolated her. James listened without judgment, occasionally sharing his own experiences of single parenthood and the challenges of balancing work with raising Emma. There was something deeply comforting about talking to someone who understood what it meant to make difficult choices with limited options. "I should let you get some sleep," Sophia said finally, noticing how late it had gotten. "You probably have to work tomorrow." "Actually, I took the weekend off," James said. "Emma's at her grandmother's house until Sunday evening. It's their monthly sleepover tradition. So I'm completely free to help you figure out your next steps." "You don't need to do that," Sophia protested. "You've already done more than enough." "I want to," James said simply. "Besides, Emma would never forgive me if she found out I had the chance to help Dr. Romano and didn't take it." "You're basically her hero," Sophia smiled at that. "She's pretty heroic herself. I don't think I've ever had a patient ask so many intelligent questions about their own surgery. Most 8-year-olds want to know if it will hurt. Emma wanted to know how the artificial valve would integrate with her existing heart muscle. She's been obsessed with cardiology ever since the surgery," James said with obvious pride. "She checks out every book about the heart from the library, draws diagrams of cardiac procedures. Her teacher says she's considering a career change after listening to Emma's presentations." "She could do it," Sophia said seriously. "She has the curiosity and the analytical mind for medicine. And the empathy, that's just as important as the technical skills." James showed Sophia to the guest room, which was small but comfortable, with a window that looked out onto a tiny backyard garden. "There are clean towels in the bathroom, and help yourself to anything in the kitchen. I'm usually up early, but sleep as late as you want." After he'd gone to his own room, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, still processing everything that had happened. 12 hours ago, she'd been Dr. Sophia Romano, successful surgeon about to marry into one of the city's most prominent families. Now she was Sarah. She'd almost forgotten it was her real name, wearing a stranger's clothes and sleeping in a guest room in a house she'd never seen before. But for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. She thought about Richard, probably still at the reception venue, trying to manage the fallout from her disappearance. He'd be angry, of course, but mostly he'd be calculating, figuring out how to minimize the embarrassment, how to spin the story to their social circle. It wouldn't occur to him to worry about whether she was safe or scared. That lack of concern told her everything she needed to know about the kind of marriage they would have had. The next morning, Sophia woke to the smell of coffee and something that might have been pancakes. She'd slept better than she had in weeks, despite the strange surroundings. There was something peaceful about the house, a sense of security that had nothing to do with gates or security systems. She found James in the kitchen, standing at the stove with a spatula in hand. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile. "I hope you're hungry. I may have gotten a little carried away with breakfast." The kitchen table was set for two, with plates of pancakes, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit. It was the kind of homemade breakfast Sophia hadn't had in years. Richard preferred to eat out or have meals catered, and her own cooking skills had atrophied from lack of use. "This looks amazing," she said, settling into a chair. "I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me. Well, fair warning, my pancakes are decent, but they're nothing compared to Emma's grandmother's recipe. She's been trying to teach me for 4 years, and I still can't get them quite right." As they ate, Sophia found herself relaxing into the domestic rhythm of the morning. James was easy to talk to, with a quiet sense of humor and genuine interest in what she had to say. He asked about her work at the hospital, her research interests, the cases that had meant the most to her. For the first time in months, someone was interested in her thoughts and opinions, rather than her appearance or social connections. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said as James refilled her coffee cup. "What was your wife like?" James's expression softened. Catherine was vibrant. That's the word that always comes to mind. She could find something interesting in any situation, any person. She was a kindergarten teacher, and she approached everything with this sense of curiosity and joy that was infectious. She sounds wonderful. She was. Emma has her mother's curiosity and optimism. Even during the worst of the medical crises, Emma always wanted to understand what was happening, wanted to know how she could help her own recovery. He paused. "Catherine would have liked you, I think. She had tremendous respect for people who dedicated their lives to helping others." "I miss that sense of purpose," Sophia admitted. "Lately, I feel like I've been going through the motions. The surgery is still rewarding, but everything else. The hospital politics, the social obligations, trying to be the perfect doctor's wife before I even got married. I lost sight of why I wanted to be a physician in the first place." "What made you want to be a doctor originally?" Sophia smiled at the memory. "My grandfather had a heart attack when I was 12. I spent a lot of time in cardiac ICUs that summer, watching the doctors and nurses work. I was fascinated by how they could take someone who was dying and give them their life back. It seemed like magic, but I knew it was really knowledge and skill and dedication." "That's still what you do," James pointed out. "You gave Emma her life back. You've probably done that for hundreds of patients." "I know, intellectually. But somewhere along the way, I started focusing more on advancing my career than on helping people. I took the cases that would get me published, that would impress the department heads. I forgot about the magic part." James reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Maybe running away last night wasn't about escaping something. Maybe it was about running towards something you'd lost." The simple touch was electric, and Sophia felt something shift between them. This wasn't just gratitude anymore, or even friendship. There was a connection forming that had nothing to do with Emma's surgery, and everything to do with the two people they were beneath their circumstances. "James," she said softly, and he seemed to realize they were holding hands. He started to pull away, but she held on. "I know this is complicated," she said. "I know I'm probably the last person you should be getting involved with right now. I just ran away from a wedding. I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, and there's probably going to be a scandal when this all comes out. But I haven't felt this much like myself in years. And I think that has a lot to do with you." Their quiet morning was interrupted by the sound of a key in the front door, followed by a familiar voice calling out, "Dad, are you home?" "Grandma decided to bring me back early because she has a doctor's appointment." James jumped up from the table, suddenly remembering that his carefully planned weekend alone had just been disrupted. "That's Emma," he said to Sophia, who was already standing. "I completely forgot about her grandmother's appointment. Should I hide?" Sophia asked, looking uncertain. "No," James said quickly, then paused. "I mean, unless you want to. But Emma's going to see you eventually if you're staying here, and she's actually pretty good with surprises." The sound of footsteps approached the kitchen, and then Emma appeared. In the doorway, a bright-eyed 8-year-old with her father's dark hair and a curious expression that immediately focused on their breakfast guest. "Dad," Emma said slowly, taking in the scene. "There's a lady eating pancakes in our kitchen." "Emma, this is Dr. Romano," James said, moving to stand beside his daughter. "You remember her, right? From the hospital?" Emma's eyes widened as recognition dawned. "Dr. Romano. The one who fixed my heart." "That's right," Sophia said, crouching down to Emma's eye level. "And you can call me Sophia if you want. How are you feeling?" "Your dad tells me you've been playing soccer." "I scored 3 goals last week," Emma said excitedly, then seemed to remember her manners. "But what are you doing here? Are you having breakfast with my dad?" James and Sophia exchanged glances, both realizing they needed to navigate this carefully. Dr. Romano needed a place to stay for a few days, James said. She's going through a difficult time, and I offered to help. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. Like when Mrs. Patterson from down the street stayed with us after her husband died. Something like that, James agreed. Okay, Emma said, apparently satisfied with this explanation. Then she turned to Sophia with renewed interest. Do you want to see my heart surgery scrapbook? I made it after I got home from the hospital. I would love to see it, Sophia said, and Emma beamed. For the next hour, Sophia found herself sitting on the living room floor, looking through Emma's carefully assembled scrapbook while the little girl explained each photo, drawing, and piece of medical information she'd collected. There were pictures from the hospital, get-well cards from friends, and even some remarkably accurate diagrams of cardiac anatomy that Emma had drawn herself. This is amazing, Emma, Sophia said, genuinely impressed. You understand more about heart surgery than some of my medical students. Dad helped me research everything, Emma said proudly. And I've been reading all the books about cardiology from the library. Did you know that a hummingbird's heart beats 1,200 times per minute? I did not know that, Sophia said, smiling at Emma's enthusiasm. That's incredible. Emma's been fascinated by all things medical since her surgery, James said, joining them on the floor. Her teacher says she gives presentations about cardiac procedures that make the other kids want to be doctors too. I want to be a heart surgeon like you, Emma announced to Sophia. Dad says it takes a really long time to learn how to do it. But I don't mind. It does take a long time, Sophia agreed. But if you're really passionate about it, and you're willing to work hard, you can definitely do it. You already have the most important qualities, curiosity and compassion. Emma glowed under the praise, and James felt something warm settle in his chest as he watched the two most important people in his life connect so naturally. Are you going to stay for lunch? Emma asked Sophia. Dad makes really good grilled cheese sandwiches, and we usually watch movies on Saturday afternoons. Sophia looked to James, who nodded encouragingly. If Dr. Romano doesn't have other plans, he said. I don't have any plans at all, Sophia said. And grilled cheese sounds perfect. As the day progressed, Sophia found herself falling into the rhythm of the Thompson household. Emma insisted on showing her everything: her room, her art projects, the small garden where she and her father grew vegetables. It was a life built on small, meaningful moments rather than grand gestures, and Sophia found it surprisingly appealing. Dad, Emma said during lunch, can Sophia help me with my science project? It's about the circulatory system, and she probably knows more about it than anyone. That depends on whether Sophia has time, James said carefully. She might have other things she needs to do. Actually, I'd love to help, Sophia said. What's your project about? For the next 2 hours they worked together at the kitchen table, with Emma asking rapid-fire questions about blood flow, heart chambers, and surgical procedures while Sophia sketched diagrams and explained concepts in terms an 8-year-old could understand. James watched from nearby, ostensibly reading the newspaper, but actually observing the easy interaction between his daughter and the woman who had saved her life. You're really good with her, he said later, when Emma had gone to play in the backyard. She's an exceptional person, Sophia replied. Smart, curious, brave. She reminds me why I wanted to work with pediatric cases in the first place. She's not usually this comfortable with new people, James admitted, especially adults. But she seems to trust you completely. The feeling is mutual, Sophia said, watching Emma through the window as she played on her swing set. I don't have much experience with people this age outside of medical settings, but there's something about Emma that just makes sense to me. She has that effect on people, James said fondly. Catherine used to say that Emma was born with an old soul and a young heart. As evening approached, Emma lobbied hard for Sophia to stay for dinner and their traditional Saturday night movie. "Please?" she said, employing the 8-year-old's most powerful weapon-wide, hopeful eyes. "We're watching Finding Nemo, and it's really good. Plus, Dad always makes popcorn." "I don't want to intrude on your family time," Sophia said, though. James could see she was tempted. "You're not intruding," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You're part of our family now, right, Dad?" James felt his breath catch at his daughter's casual declaration. "Right," he said softly, meeting Sophia's eyes. "If you'd like to be." Sunday morning arrived with autumn sunshine, streaming through the windows and the comfortable sounds of a family beginning their day. Sophia woke to Emma's laughter echoing from the kitchen, followed by James's deeper chuckle, and for a moment she lay still, savoring the warmth of being included in their morning routine. When she emerged from the guest room, she found Emma sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of medical journals that definitely hadn't been there the day before. "Dad got these from the hospital library for me," Emma announced proudly. "They're real medical journals about heart surgery. Some of the words are too big, but Sophia can help me understand them." James looked slightly sheepish as he handed Sophia a cup of coffee. "I may have called in a favor with a friend who works in the medical library." Emma was so excited about her project that I wanted to get her some real research materials. "These are perfect," Sophia said, settling beside Emma and opening one of the journals. "Look, this article is about a procedure very similar to the one we did on your heart." For the next hour, they pored over the medical literature together, with Sophia translating complex terminology and Emma taking careful notes in her precise handwriting. James watched from across the room, struck by how natural Sophia looked in this domestic setting, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing his late wife's clothes, completely absorbed in helping his daughter learn. "Dr. Romano, I mean Sophia," Emma said suddenly, looking up from her notes. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you sad about something? Yesterday you seemed happy, but sometimes when you think no one is looking, you look the way Dad used to look after Mom died." The question caught Sophia off guard with its directness and insight. She glanced at James, who was watching them with careful attention, then back at Emma's earnest face. "I am a little sad," Sophia said honestly. "I had to make a very difficult decision recently, and even though I think it was the right choice, it's still hard." "What kind of decision?" Sophia considered how much to explain to an 8-year-old. "I was supposed to get married yesterday," she said finally. "But when the time came, I realized that marrying that person would mean giving up some very important parts of myself, so I decided not to go through with it." Emma nodded solemnly. "Like when I had to decide whether to have the heart surgery. It was scary to do it, but it would have been scarier not to." "That's exactly right," Sophia said, impressed by Emma's understanding. "Sometimes the brave choice is also the scary choice. Are you glad you made the decision?" Sophia looked around the kitchen, at Emma's medical journal spread across the table, at James leaning against the counter with his coffee mug, at the family photos and children's artwork that made the space feel alive with love and purpose. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm very glad." Later that afternoon, while Emma was video calling with her grandmother, James and Sophia found themselves alone in the backyard. The October air was crisp but pleasant, perfect for sitting on the small deck that overlooked Emma's vegetable garden. "I should probably start thinking about what comes next," Sophia said, though she made no move to go inside. "I can't hide out here forever, as much as I'd like to." "What do you want to come next?" James asked. "Honestly, I want to remember why I became a doctor. I want to take cases because they matter, not because they'll advance my career. I want to work with patients who need me, not just ones who can afford me." She paused. "I want to feel like myself again." "That sounds like a good start." "The practical part is more complicated," Sophia admitted. "Richard and I shared everything, The penthouse, the car, even most of our social circle. Starting over at 34 feels overwhelming. You don't have to figure it all out at once, James said. Gently. One decision at a time, remember? Sophia turned to look at him, struck by how comfortable this felt sitting in his backyard, talking about her future, feeling like someone actually cared about her happiness rather than her usefulness. James, can I ask you something? Of course. Do. You ever think about dating again? I mean, it's been 4 years since Catherine died. Don't you get lonely? James was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Sometimes, he admitted, but it's complicated. Emma comes first, always, and finding someone who understands that isn't easy. Plus, Catherine and I had something really special. For a long time, I couldn't imagine anyone measuring up to that. And now? He looked at her directly, and Sophia felt her breath catch at the intensity in his eyes. Now I'm starting to think maybe the point isn't to find someone who measures up to Catherine. Maybe it's about finding someone who brings out different parts of me, someone who makes me want to be better than I am. James ... I know this is complicated, he said quickly. I know you're in a vulnerable place right now, and I don't want to take advantage of that. But I also can't pretend that having you here hasn't changed something for me. Emma's happier than she's been in months, and I feel more like myself than I have in years. Sophia reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. It's not taking advantage if I feel the same way. And I do, which is probably crazy considering I was supposed to marry someone else yesterday. Maybe it's not crazy, James said softly. Maybe it's just right timing. They were interrupted by Emma calling from inside the house. Dad, Sophia, come quick, there's something on the news. They hurried inside to find Emma standing in front of the television, remote in hand, staring at a news report with a familiar face on screen. It was Richard Ashford, standing outside the Grand Millbrook Hotel, looking composed but strained as he spoke to a cluster of reporters. Calling off the wedding was a mutual decision, Richard was saying. Dr. Romano and I realized that we want different things for our futures, and we decided it was better to part ways amicably rather than proceed with a marriage that wouldn't make either of us happy. Is he lying? Emma asked, looking back and forth between James and Sophia. He's managing the situation, Sophia said carefully, trying to make it sound less dramatic than it actually was. But you ran away in your wedding dress, Emma pointed out. That's pretty dramatic, despite everything, Sophia laughed. You're absolutely right. It was very dramatic. The news report continued, with Richard fielding questions about the canceled reception, the disappointed guests, and the future of their respective careers. He handled it all with polished professionalism, never once expressing concern for Sophia's well-being, or acknowledging that she might have had legitimate reasons for leaving. He doesn't seem very sad, Emma observed with 8-year-old directness. No, Sophia agreed, feeling a final piece of doubt fall away. He doesn't. As they watched Richard's carefully crafted statements, Sophia realized she felt nothing but relief. This man who was supposed to love her was treating their canceled wedding like a business deal that had fallen through, unfortunate, but manageable. There was no mention of her happiness, her dreams, or even basic concern for where she might be. I think, Sophia said slowly, I made exactly the right decision. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, James and Sophia sat on the couch together, finally addressing the elephant in the room. So what happens now? James asked. Are you going back to your old life? Your job at the hospital? A hospital? I'll have to go back to work eventually, Sophia said. But I don't want to go back to my old life. I want to build something new, something that feels authentic. She paused. If that's something you'd be interested in building with me. Ah. You sure? James asked. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. Emma's already gotten attached to you, and so have I, if you change your mind later. "I won't change my mind," Sophia said firmly. "James, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. With you, with Emma, in this house that feels more like home than anywhere I've lived in my adult life." James cupped her face in his hands, searching her eyes for any trace of uncertainty. Finding none, he leaned forward and kissed her softly. A promise of new beginnings and possibilities neither of them had imagined just 2 days before. When they broke apart, Sophia smiled. "So," she said, "I guess I should probably find an apartment somewhere nearby. And figure out if the hospital will let me adjust my schedule so I can spend more time with patients instead of attending fundraising galas. Or," James said, "you could stay here with us. Emma's already declared you part of the family, and I happen to agree with her. Are you asking me to move in with you?" Sophia asked, though her smile suggested she wasn't opposed to the idea. "I'm asking you to take a chance on something real," James said. "Something that starts with who we actually are instead of who we think we should be." Sophia looked around the living room, at Emma's artwork on the walls, at the medical journals still scattered on the coffee table, at the evidence of a life built on love and genuine connection rather than expectation and obligation. "Yes," she said simply, "I'd like that very much." 3 weeks had passed since that rainy October night when Sophia had climbed into James's taxi in her torn wedding dress. Now as she stood in the kitchen of what had become their home, making Emma's lunch for school, it felt like she'd been part of this family for years rather than days. The integration hadn't been without its challenges. Sophia's belongings had been delivered by a cold, efficient moving service boxes of expensive clothes, medical texts, and personal items that seemed oddly formal in the warm chaos of the Thompson household. Richard had been surprisingly cooperative about the logistics, probably eager to erase any evidence of their failed relationship from his penthouse. "Are you sure about the field trip permission slip?" Sophia called to James, who was helping Emma gather her science project materials. "I don't want to overstep since I'm not technically her guardian." "You're overthinking it," Emma said matter-of-factly, appearing in the kitchen doorway with her backpack. "Mrs. Henderson said any responsible adult in the household can sign permission slips. Besides, you know more about the human body than anyone else's parents." It was true Emma's class was visiting the medical museum downtown, and Sophia had spent the previous evening helping Emma prepare questions about cardiac exhibits. The 8-year-old's scientific curiosity had only grown stronger since Sophia's arrival, and her teacher had commented on how much more confident Emma seemed in class discussions. "Speaking of which," James said, joining them in the kitchen, "I got a call from Emma's teacher yesterday. She wants to know if you'd be willing to come speak to the class about cardiology. Apparently, Emma's presentations have gotten the other kids very interested in medical careers." Sophia smiled, feeling a familiar warmth when she talked about sharing medical knowledge. "I'd love to. But are you sure the other parents won't mind? Given all the publicity about the wedding." "The publicity died down pretty quickly," James assured her. Richard's narrative about mutual agreement and different life goals seemed to satisfy most people. And in this neighborhood, people are more concerned with whether you're good to their kids than whether you made society page headlines. It was a relief, actually. Sophia had been dreading the inevitable gossip and social fallout, but the working class community where James lived operated by different rules than the elite circles she'd been part of. Here, she was judged by how she treated Emma, whether she contributed to household responsibilities, and whether she made James happy. The answers to all three were overwhelmingly positive. "I need to head to the hospital," Sophia said, checking her watch. "I have surgery at 9, and then I'm meeting with Dr. Patterson about adjusting my schedule." Over the past 3 weeks, Sophia had been gradually reshaping her professional life. She'd requested a reduction in administrative responsibilities and social obligations, asking instead to focus on complex surgical cases and patient care. The department head had been surprisingly supportive. Sophia's surgical skills were too valuable to lose, and her recent media attention, while unconventional, had actually brought positive attention to the hospital's cardiac program. "What time will you be home?" Emma asked, hugging Sophia goodbye. "Around 4, Sophia replied, still marveling at how natural it felt to be part of these daily routines. "We can work on your science fair project before dinner, and I'll pick you up from school," James added, kissing the top of Emma's head. "Mrs. Rodriguez is covering my afternoon shift so I can attend the parent-teacher conference." As Sophia drove to the hospital in her new, more modest car, she'd traded the BMW Richard had given her for a practical sedan. She reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The penthouse had been replaced by a cozy house with a shared bathroom and a kitchen where someone was always cooking or doing homework. Her wardrobe now consisted largely of comfortable clothes suitable for homework help and backyard gardening rather than charity galas and business dinners. The change in her work life had been equally significant. Instead of focusing on high-profile cases that would advance her career, she'd begun taking on more pediatric surgeries and complex cases other surgeons avoided. Her success rate remained excellent, but more importantly, she felt reconnected to the passion that had originally drawn her to medicine. "Dr. Romano," called Dr. Patterson as she entered the cardiac wing. "How's the schedule adjustment working out?" "It's perfect," Sophia replied honestly. "I'm seeing more patients, spending more time on actual medical care, and I'm happier than I've been in years." "It shows in your work," Dr. Patterson said. "The patient satisfaction scores for your cases have gone through the roof, and your surgical outcomes are as strong as ever. Plus, I've heard you're becoming quite the community ambassador, speaking at schools, volunteering with the pediatric support groups." It was true. Word had gotten out about Sophia's willingness to speak to young patients and their families, and she'd begun volunteering regularly with children facing cardiac procedures. It was work that felt meaningful in a way her previous career focus had not. "Actually," Dr. Patterson continued, "I wanted to talk to you about a new program we're developing. A partnership with local schools to provide health education and early detection of cardiac issues in underserved communities. We need someone with your surgical expertise, but also your communication skills. Interested?" "Very interested," Sophia said immediately. "Send me the details." That afternoon, Sophia arrived home to find James and Emma in the backyard, working on what appeared to be a new garden bed. Emma looked up excitedly when she saw Sophia approaching. "We're planting a winter herb garden," Emma announced. "Dad said you mentioned that your grandmother taught you about gardening, so we thought you could help us design it." Sophia felt a familiar tightness in her throat when Emma mentioned her grandmother. She'd shared stories about her grandmother's garden during one of their many evening conversations, but she hadn't expected James to remember or act on it. "I'd love to help," she said, kneeling beside them in the soil. "What were you thinking of planting?" For the next hour, they worked together, planning the layout and discussing which herbs would thrive in the fall weather. Emma asked dozens of questions about plant biology, making connections between botanical systems and human anatomy that impressed both adults. "You know," James said as they cleaned up their gardening tools, "watching you two work together makes me think about something." "What's that?" Sophia asked. "Emma's going to need a solid educational plan if she's serious about medical school someday. The public school is good, but it doesn't have the advanced science program she needs to really excel." Sophia had been thinking the same thing. Emma's intellectual curiosity and analytical skills were remarkable, but she'd need more challenging academic opportunities to reach her full potential. "I've been researching prep schools with strong science programs," Sophia said carefully. "I know private school tuition is expensive, but there are scholarship programs, and I could help with applications." "Actually," James said, "I've been thinking about going back to school myself." Getting a degree in something other than just taxi driver with good instincts, maybe business management or education. Something that would give me more stable income and better opportunities. Sophia looked at him with surprise and admiration. James, that's wonderful. What made you think about it? Honestly, you did, he said. Watching you reshape your career to focus on what really matters to you made me realize I could do the same thing. I love driving the taxi because it lets me help people and stay flexible for Emma, but it's not a long-term plan. What would you want to study? I've been thinking about educational administration, James said. Maybe working with school districts to develop support programs for single parents or kids dealing with medical issues. I have experience with both, and it would still be about helping people. Emma, who had been listening to this conversation with growing excitement, suddenly spoke up. If you go back to school and I work extra hard on my science projects, and Sophia keeps teaching us about medicine, we could all be students together. The idea delighted her so much that she began planning out loud study schedules, shared library trips, family homework sessions. Sophia and James exchanged glances over her head, both thinking the same thing. This felt like planning a real future, not just getting through day by day. There's something else I wanted to discuss, Sophia said later that evening after Emma had gone to bed. Dr. Patterson offered me a position heading up a new community health program. It would mean more regular hours, less weekend call time, and work that feels genuinely meaningful. That sounds perfect for you, James said. Are you going to take it? I want to, but it would also mean a significant pay cut compared to my current position. I'd be making maybe half of what I make now. She paused. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with that, since we're building a life together. James reached for her hands, holding them gently. Sophia, I've been supporting Emma and myself on a taxi driver's income for 8 years. We're not wealthy, but we're secure. And if we're both working toward careers we actually care about, we'll figure out the financial part. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel like you have to support me while I take a lower paying job. I want you to be happy, James said simply. I want you to do work that feeds your soul, the same way I want to find work that does that for me. We'll make it work, because we'll be working towards something together. That night, as Sophia lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around them, she thought about the conversation she'd had with her former colleague Dr. Martinez earlier that day. He'd called to check on her ostensibly, but really to share gossip from the hospital's more elite social circles. Richard's already dating someone new, he'd said. Some pharmaceutical heiress he met at a conference. Very appropriate match, according to everyone who matters. Good for him, Sophia had replied, and meant it. I hope he's happy. And you? Dr. Martinez had asked. Are you happy living in wherever it is you're living now? Sophia had looked around the hospital break room with its fluorescent lights and vending machines, and thought about the kitchen at home where Emma would be doing homework while James made dinner. Happier than I've ever been, she'd said. Now, lying in the guest room that had become her room, in the house that had become her home, with the family that had become her family, Sophia felt a deep sense of contentment she'd never experienced before. She was no longer Dr. Sophia Romano, elite surgeon and society bride-to-be. She was just Sophia James's partner, Emma's friend and mentor, a doctor who prioritized patients over prestige. It was exactly who she'd always wanted to be. First sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in November, when Sophia received a call at the hospital from Emma's school. She was between surgeries, reviewing patient charts, when her phone rang with the distinctive tone she'd assigned to Thompson family calls. Miss Sophia? Came Emma's small voice, sounding uncharacteristically shaky. Can you come pick me up from school? There are some people here asking questions about you and Dad, and Mrs. Henderson thinks I should go home. Sophia felt her blood run cold. What kind of people, sweetheart? What kind of questions? They said they're from social services, Emma whispered. They want to know about our living situation and whether Dad is taking good care of me, Mrs. Henderson told them they need to make an appointment, but they said it was urgent. I'm on my way, Sophia said, already grabbing her keys. Find Mrs. Henderson and stay with her until I get there. Don't talk to anyone else, okay? Okay, Sophia? Am I in trouble? Are you and Dad in trouble? No, baby, Sophia said, her heart breaking at the fear in Emma's voice. You're not in trouble. This is probably just a misunderstanding, but we're going to sort it out. Sophia called James as she drove to Emma's school, filling him in on the situation. He was quiet for a long moment after she finished explaining. This isn't random, he said finally. Someone called this in. Someone who wants to make trouble. For us, who would do that? I have some ideas, James said grimly. I'll meet you at the school. When Sophia arrived at Emma's elementary school, she found James's taxi already parked outside. She hurried into the main office where she found James, Emma, and Mrs. Henderson in what appeared to be a tense conversation with two official-looking individuals. Dr. Romano, said the woman, who introduced herself as Miss Carter from Child Protective Services. We were hoping to speak with you. We've received some concerning reports about the living situation in your household. What kind of reports? Sophia asked, instinctively moving to stand beside James and Emma. Reports that Mr. Thompson is cohabitating with a woman who isn't Emma's mother, that there may be inappropriate relationships developing, and that Emma's welfare might be at risk due to instability in the home. Emma looked confused and frightened, clearly not understanding all the implications, but sensing the threat in the air. James's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. Who made these reports? James asked. We can't reveal that information, said the male social worker. But we do need to conduct a home visit and interview Emma separately to ensure her safety and well-being. Absolutely not, Sophia said firmly. You are not interviewing an 8-year-old without her father present, based on anonymous accusations from someone with obviously malicious intent. Dr. Romano, we understand you're protective of the family, but I'm protective of a child who has already been through enough trauma in her young life, Sophia interrupted. Emma lost her mother 4 years ago, underwent major cardiac surgery 6 months ago, and is finally thriving in a stable, loving home. The idea that her welfare is at risk is not only false, it's insulting. Mrs. Henderson, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. I feel I should mention that Emma Thompson is one of our most well-adjusted, high-achieving students. Her grades have improved significantly over the past month. She's more social with her peers, and she frequently talks about how happy she is at home. If there are welfare concerns, they're not evident in her school behavior. Nevertheless, Ms. Carter said, we have an obligation to investigate any reports of potential child endangerment. Fine, James said, but you'll do it properly. Schedule an appointment for a home visit when Emma isn't there. Bring whatever forms or documentation you need. And I want our attorney present. You don't need an attorney if you have nothing to hide, the male social worker said. Everyone needs an attorney when they're being accused of child endangerment, based on lies, Sophia replied sharply. After the social workers left with a promise to schedule a formal home visit, James, Sophia, and Emma sat in Mrs. Henderson's office, processing what had just happened. Am I going to have to live somewhere else? Emma asked in a small voice. Absolutely not, James said firmly, pulling his daughter onto his lap. You're my daughter, this is our family, and no one is going to change that. But what if those people think Sophia is bad for us? Then those people will be wrong, James said, and we'll prove it. That evening, after Emma was asleep, James and Sophia sat at the kitchen table with legal documents spread before them. James's attorney, a family law specialist named David Chun, had agreed to meet with them the next day, but he'd already outlined the seriousness of the situation over the phone. "The good news is that anonymous reports rarely hold up without evidence," James said, reading through the paperwork. "The bad news is that someone with resources and connections made these accusations, and they're not going to stop here." "It has to be Richard," Sophia said. "Or someone acting on his behalf. Maybe even my parents. They were furious about the wedding cancellation, and they've never approved of my choice to date outside their social circle. Can you think of anyone else who might want to cause problems?" Sophia considered the question. "There were a few people at the hospital who weren't happy about my schedule changes. Some of the department politics got ugly when I turned down the chief of surgery track. But this seems more personal than professional." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. James looked at the clock. It was nearly 10 p.m., unusually late for unexpected visitors. "Stay here," he said to Sophia, but she followed him to the front door anyway. Through the peephole, they could see a well-dressed woman in her 60s, standing beside a younger man in an expensive suit. Sophia recognized them immediately. "My parents," she said quietly. James opened the door to find Patricia and Robert Romano on his doorstep, looking deeply uncomfortable but determined. "Sophia," her mother said, "we need to talk." "Come in," Sophia said reluctantly, stepping aside to let them enter. The Romanos looked around the modest living room with barely concealed disdain, taking in the comfortable furniture, family photos, and Emma's artwork displayed prominently on the walls. "This is where you've been living?" Patricia asked as if she couldn't quite believe it. "This is my home," Sophia said firmly. "James, these are my parents, Patricia and Robert Romano. Mom, Dad, this is James Thompson." The introductions were stiffly polite, but the tension in the room was palpable. Robert Romano was studying James with the calculating look of a man used to sizing up opponents. "We came to bring you home," Patricia said without preamble. "This situation has gone on long enough, Sophia. You've made your point, you've had your rebellion, but it's time to come back to reality." "This is my reality," Sophia replied. "And I'm not coming home." "Don't be ridiculous," Robert said dismissively. "You're living in a house that's probably worth less than your old car, playing house with a taxi driver and his daughter. It's beneath you. It's the first place I've ever felt like I belonged," Sophia said, her voice rising with anger. "You belong with your own kind," Patricia said sharply. "With people who understand your education, your background, your responsibilities. Not with," she gestured vaguely at James, "people like this." James had remained silent during this exchange, but now he stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Romano, I understand you're concerned about your daughter. But she's an adult, and she's chosen to be here. She's happy. She's contributing to our family, and frankly, your disapproval doesn't change any of that." "Our disapproval carries more weight than you might think," Robert said coldly. "We're prepared to make things very difficult for this arrangement to continue. Are you threatening us?" Sophia asked, incredulous. "We're offering you a way out," Patricia said. "Come home, repair your relationship with Richard. He's willing to forgive this episode, and will make sure there are no further investigations into Mr. Thompson's parenting or living situation." The implication hit both James and Sophia simultaneously. "You called Child Protective Services," James said, his voice deadly quiet. "We called in legitimate concerns about our daughter's welfare and the welfare of a child in an unstable environment," Robert said without remorse. "Emma is not in an unstable environment," Sophia said furiously. "She's in a loving home with a devoted father and people who care about her well-being. The only unstable thing in her life right now is being threatened by petty, vindictive people who can't accept that I don't want the life they planned for me." "Sophia, be reasonable," Patricia pleaded. "You're throwing away everything, your social position, your financial security, your reputation, for what? A man who drives a taxi for a living?" "I'm choosing love over money," Sophia said simply. I'm choosing authenticity over appearances. I'm choosing a life that makes me happy instead of a life that makes you proud. And what happens when the novelty wears off? Robert demanded. When you get tired of living paycheck to paycheck, when you realize what you've given up, you'll come crawling back. But by then Richard will have moved on, and so will your career. Prospects. Then that's my choice to make, Sophia said firmly. The Romanos exchanged glances, and Patricia's expression hardened. Very well. But understand that this means we're cutting off all support, financial, social, professional. You'll be entirely on your own. I already am on my own, Sophia replied. And I've never been happier. After her parents left Sophia, and James sat in stunned silence for several minutes. I'm sorry, Sophia said finally. I'm so sorry they dragged Emma into this. I never thought they'd stoop to using Child Protective Services as a weapon. It's not your fault, James said, though his jaw was still tight with anger. But now we know what we're up against. They're not going to let this go quietly. What do? We fight, James said simply. We document everything. We prove that. Emma is thriving. And we show anyone who cares to look that this is a stable, loving home. And if they want to make this ugly, we'll be ready for them. The home visit from Child Protective Services was scheduled for the following Thursday afternoon. James took the day off from driving, and Sophia rearranged her surgery schedule to be present. They spent the weekend organizing household documents, gathering character references, and coaching Emma on what to expect. Their attorney, David Chun, arrived an hour before the scheduled visit to review their strategy. He was a practical man in his 40s who specialized in family law and had seen his share of vindictive custody cases. The good news is that this is clearly a harassment complaint rather than a legitimate welfare concern, he said, reviewing their prepared documentation. Emma's medical records show excellent care. Her school reports are exemplary, and you have strong community support. The bad news is that Child Protective Services has to take every complaint seriously, regardless of motivation. What's the worst-case scenario? James asked. They could recommend temporary placement while they investigate further, but that's extremely unlikely given the evidence. More likely, they'll close the case after today's visit and note that the complaint was unfounded. When Miss Carter and her colleague arrived, they were accompanied by a supervisor, a sign that the case had attracted attention at higher levels. The three social workers were polite but thorough, examining every room of the house, reviewing household schedules, and asking detailed questions about Emma's care and well-being. Dr. Romano, Miss Carter said as they wrapped up the home inspection, can you explain your relationship with Mr. Thompson and Emma? The reports we received suggested this might be an inappropriate situation. James and I are in a committed relationship, Sophia replied clearly. I moved in 3 weeks ago, and we're building a life together as a family. My relationship with Emma is that of a caring adult who's become part of her support system. And your professional relationship with Emma predates your personal relationship. With Mr. Thompson? That's correct. I was Emma's cardiac surgeon 6 months ago. James and I reconnected by chance several weeks ago, and our relationship developed naturally from there. The supervisor, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson, looked up from her notes. Dr. Romano, are you aware that some people might view your relationship with a former patient's family as ethically questionable? Sophia had been prepared for this question. I've consulted with the hospital's ethics board about this situation. Since Emma is no longer my patient and has been transferred to another cardiologist for ongoing care, there are no ethical violations. My relationship with the Thompson family is entirely personal. Can we speak with Emma now? Miss Carter asked. Emma appeared from her bedroom, where she'd been waiting with a book about marine biology. She looked nervous but determined, and Sophia felt a surge of pride at the 8-year-old's composure. The interview with Emma took place in the living room, with James and Sophia present, but not participating. The social workers asked Emma about her daily routines, her relationship with her father, her feelings about Sophia living with them, and her overall happiness. "Do you feel safe in this house?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Of course," Emma replied, looking puzzled by the question. "Dad takes really good care of me, and now Sophia helps too. I've never felt unsafe here." "How do you feel about Sophia living here?" Emma's face lit up. "I love having Sophia here. She helps me with my science projects, and she knows everything about medicine, and she makes Dad happy. Plus, she's teaching me about surgery, which is what I want to do when I grow up." "Has anyone ever told you that this living situation might not be appropriate?" Emma frowned. "What do you mean, not appropriate? We're a family. Families live together." The social workers spent another hour reviewing documents, taking photos, and asking follow-up questions. Finally, they gathered in the kitchen for what appeared to be a final consultation. "Mr. Thompson, Dr. Romano," Miss Carter said, "based on our investigation today, we found no evidence of child endangerment, neglect, or inappropriate conduct. Emma appears to be thriving in a stable, loving environment. We'll be closing this case and noting that the complaints were unfounded." The relief that washed over James and Sophia was palpable, but Mrs. Patterson wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "I want to be clear about something. This investigation was prompted by very specific accusations from people with detailed knowledge of your situation. If similar complaints are filed in the future, we'll have to investigate those as well. I'd recommend documenting your family stability and Emma's well-being carefully, in case this becomes an ongoing issue." After the social workers left, the three of them sat in the living room, emotionally exhausted but vindicated. "Are the mean people going to come back?" Emma asked. "I don't think so," James said, pulling her onto his lap. "But if they do, we'll be ready for them." "Good," Emma said with 8-year-old determination. "Because this is our family, and nobody gets to break up families." That evening, after Emma was asleep, James and Sophia received an unexpected visitor. James answered the door to find Richard Ashford standing on their front porch, looking uncharacteristically rumpled and agitated. "I need to speak with Sophia," he said without preamble. "She doesn't want to speak with you," James replied, but Sophia appeared behind him. "It's okay," she said. "Let him in." Richard entered the living room, looking around with the same disdain her parents had shown. But there was something different in his expression, less anger than resignation. "I came to ask you to stop," he said to Sophia. "Stop what?" "This whole charade. Living here, playing house with them. It's embarrassing for both of us. And it's not fair to that little girl to use her as a prop in whatever game you're playing." "I'm not playing a game, Richard," Sophia said quietly. "This is my life. This is my family." "Your family?" Richard laughed harshly. "Sophia, you've known them for a month. You don't build a family in a month." "Actually you do," James said, speaking for the first time. "You build a family by choosing to show up for each other, by caring more about someone else's well-being than your own comfort, by creating something together that's bigger than any individual. Sophia does that here, every day. And what can you offer her?" Richard demanded, turning on James. "Financial security? Social status? A future that matches her education and abilities?" "I can offer her love," James said simply. "Real love. Not the kind that comes with conditions and expectations. I can offer her a chance to be herself instead of someone else's idea of who she should be." Richard turned back to Sophia. "Is that really enough for you? Love in a little house with someone else's daughter and no prospects for advancement?" "Richard, you still don't understand," Sophia said sadly. "You're talking about Emma like she's a burden, like loving her is some kind of sacrifice I'm making. But loving Emma isn't a sacrifice, it's a gift. Being part of her life, watching her grow and learn, helping her become the amazing person she's meant to be. That's not settling for less. That's choosing what matters most. And James, Richard asked, what happens when you get tired of playing working-class family? When you miss the life you gave up? I don't miss that life, Sophia said firmly. I was suffocating in that life. Here, I can breathe. Here, I can be myself, not Dr. Sophia Romano, successful surgeon and appropriate wife material, but just Sophia. Someone who happens to be a surgeon, who happens to love a man who drives a taxi, who happens to be helping raise an 8-year-old girl who's smarter and braver than most adults I know. Richard was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You really mean it, don't you? You're really choosing this. I'm choosing love over convenience, Sophia said. I'm choosing authenticity over appearances. I'm choosing a life that feeds my soul instead of one that looks good on paper. Then I guess there's nothing left to say, Richard said. Except that I hope you don't regret it. The only thing I regret, Sophia replied, is that it took me so long to find the courage to choose what I really wanted. After Richard left, James and Sophia stood in their living room, surrounded by the evidence of their life together. Emma's homework on the coffee table, medical journals mixed with family photos, the comfortable chaos of a home where people lived and loved and built something real together. Do you think this is over? Sophia asked. The investigations, the pressure from my parents, all of it. I think they've made their point, and we've made ours, James said. They tried to separate us and failed. We proved that Emma is safe and loved and thriving. At some point, even vindictive people move on to other targets. And if they don't? James pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Then we keep doing what we're doing. We keep loving each other, keep taking care of Emma, keep building the life we want. Because what we have here is real, and real things survive attacks better than artificial ones. Sophia looked around their home, at the place where she'd found herself, where she'd found love, where she'd found the family she'd been searching for without even knowing it. You know what I realized today? She said. What's that? I spent my whole life trying to be worthy of other people's approval. But I never felt worthy until I found people who loved me for who I actually am, not who I was supposed to be. And who are you actually? James asked softly. Sophia smiled, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest like coming home. I'm someone who saves hearts for a living and comes home to people who've saved mine. I'm Emma's friend and mentor and biggest supporter. I'm your partner in building something beautiful and real. She paused. I'm exactly who I've always wanted to be. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of soft snow that made everything look like a postcard. Sophia woke early, as had become her habit, and made her way to the kitchen to start coffee and begin breakfast preparations. The house was quiet except for the familiar sounds of family, James showering down the hall, Emma talking to herself as she played with the new telescope they'd given her for Christmas. 3 months had passed since the social services investigation, and life had settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exciting. The threats from her parents had largely ceased after the CPS case was closed, though Sophia suspected they were simply regrouping rather than giving up entirely. Richard had moved on publicly, his engagement to the pharmaceutical heiress making headlines in the society pages that Sophia no longer read. The kitchen table was covered with the evidence of their Christmas morning wrapping paper, coffee cups, and the carefully planned gifts they'd chosen for each other. Emma had given Sophia a hand-painted picture frame containing a photo of the three of them at Emma's science fair, where she'd won first place for her project on cardiac anatomy. James had given her a small leather-bound journal with Dr. Sophia Thompson embossed on the cover. She'd stared at that name for a long time, running her fingers over the letters. Too presumptuous? James had asked, misreading her silence for disapproval. Perfect, she'd whispered. Absolutely perfect. Now, as she prepared breakfast on Christmas morning, Sophia reflected on how naturally that future had begun to take shape. They'd talked seriously about marriage several times over the past month, not in the abstract way of people testing an idea, but in the concrete way of people making actual plans. When would you want to do it? James had asked a few weeks earlier, as they cleaned up after dinner while Emma did homework. Soon, Sophia had replied without hesitation. I don't need a big ceremony or a long engagement. I just want to be officially part of this family. What about your career, your name? I'll hyphenate professionally Dr. Romano Thompson. That way my medical credentials stay consistent, but I still get to be a Thompson at home. They decided on a small ceremony in March after Emma's spring break. Just immediate family, which, for Sophia, meant James and Emma and a few close friends. The antithesis of the $50 million extravaganza she'd run away from. Sophia? Emma's voice interrupted her thoughts. Can we call Grandma Chun and tell her about the telescope? James's attorney had become an unexpected friend during the custody investigation, and his mother had essentially adopted Emma as an honorary granddaughter. Mrs. Chen came for dinner every Sunday and had insisted on being included in their Christmas morning celebration. Of course, Sophia said, handing Emma the phone. But ask if she wants to come over for brunch, instead of just talking. As Emma made the call, James appeared in the kitchen, looking sleep-rumpled and content. Good morning, soon-to-be Mrs. Thompson, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Good morning, future husband, she replied, leaning back against his chest. Are you ready for the big conversation today? They'd planned to officially tell Emma about their engagement plans. Over Christmas brunch. Emma had been dropping hints for weeks that she expected them to get married, but they wanted to include her in the actual decision-making process. I think she's more ready than we are, James said, nodding toward Emma, who was enthusiastically describing her Christmas gifts to Mrs. Chun over the phone. An hour later, as they sat around the table with Mrs. Chun and the remains of an elaborate brunch, James cleared his throat. Emma, Sophia and I wanted to talk to you about something important. Emma looked up from her new medical encyclopedia with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for discussions about cardiac procedures. Are you getting married? We'd like to, Sophia said, smiling at Emma's directness. But we wanted to make sure you're okay with that first. Of course I'm okay with it, Emma said matter-of-factly. You already live here, and you already take care of me, and Dad's happier than he's been since Mom died. Marriage just makes it official. It would make Sophia your stepmother, James said carefully. That's a big change. Emma considered this seriously. Would that mean she'd be allowed to sign permission slips and come to parent-teacher conferences and stuff? Yes, Sophia said. It would mean I'd have legal rights and responsibilities as your parent. Good, Emma said decisively. Because Mrs. Henderson keeps asking if you're going to be Emma's official mom soon, and I never know what to tell her. Mrs. Chen, who had been watching this exchange with obvious delight, spoke up. Have you chosen a date? We were thinking March, James sighed. Something small and simple. Can I help plan it? Emma asked excitedly. Can I pick the flowers and the music and help Sophia choose a dress? You can help with all of it, Sophia assured her. This is going to be a family wedding, all three of us making it happen together. Later that afternoon, as Mrs. Chun helped Emma set up her telescope in the backyard, Sophia and James found themselves alone in the living room for the first time all day. So, James said, pulling her down onto the couch beside him. Any second. Thoughts about marrying into this family? Just one, Sophia said, and James's expression grew concerned. What's that? I'm wondering why it took me 34 years to figure out what I actually wanted from life, she said, curling up against his side. I could have saved myself a lot of heartache if I'd been brave enough to choose authenticity over expectations sooner. Maybe you had to go through all of that to appreciate what you have now, James said thoughtfully. Maybe the contrast is what makes this feel so right. Maybe, Sophia agreed. Or maybe I just had to meet the right people to show me who I really was underneath all the expectations and obligations. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching through the window as Emma and Mrs. Chun worked together to focus. The telescope. The sight filled Sophia with a deep sense of contentment. This was what family looked like. Not the formal conditional relationship she'd grown up with, but this easy, inclusive love that made room for everyone. "I have something to tell you," Sophia said eventually. "About work. Good news or concerning news?" "Good news, I think. Dr. Patterson formally offered me the Community Health Program Director position. It comes with a tenure track and the chance to build something really meaningful. The pay is actually better than I expected, not elite surgeon money, but solid middle-class income." "That's wonderful," James said, and she could hear the genuine pride in his voice. "You'll be perfect for that role. There's more. The program has funding for educational partnerships, including college scholarships for students interested in medical careers. Emma would be eligible when the time comes." James was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "Sophia, that's incredible. Emma's college education has been one of my biggest worries." "Well, you can stop worrying about it," Sophia said firmly. "Between the scholarship program and my position, Emma's education is covered. All the way through medical school, if that's what she chooses." "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. This is what families do. They support each other's dreams and make sure everyone has the opportunities they need to succeed." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed with her telescope manual and Mrs. Chun had returned home, James and Sophia sat on the couch planning their future with the kind of detailed attention they'd once reserved for Emma's medical care. "I've been thinking about the wedding," Sophia said, making notes in the journal James had given her. "I want to do something that honors Catherine's memory. Maybe have Emma carry something that belonged to her mother, or include her somehow in the ceremony." James felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Catherine would have loved you," he said softly. "She would have loved how you care for Emma, how you've brought joy back into this house." "I hope so," Sophia said. "I never want Emma to feel like I'm trying to replace her mother. I want her to understand that she can love and honor Catherine's memory while also building new relationships." "She already understands that," James assured her. "Emma has enough love in her heart for everyone who cares about her. She doesn't see love as a zero-sum game." "Smart girl." "She gets that from both her mothers," James said, and Sophia felt tears prick her eyes at being included in that category. As they continued planning, discussing honeymoon possibilities, a long weekend in the mountains, while Emma stayed with Mrs. Chun, housing decisions, staying in the current house, but finishing the basement to create more space, and career timelines, James starting his education degree in the fall. Sophia marveled at how natural it all felt. 6 months ago, she'd been planning a wedding that felt like an elaborate performance. Now she was planning a marriage that felt like coming home. "James," she said as they finally headed to bed. "Yeah, I need you to know something. When I ran away from that wedding, I thought I was running away from a mistake. But I wasn't running away from anything. I was running toward this. Toward you, toward Emma, toward the life I was meant to have." James stopped in the hallway and pulled her into his arms. "I love you, Sophia Romano, soon to be Sophia Romano Thompson. I love you too, James Thompson, and Emma Thompson. And this whole beautiful, complicated, perfect life we're building together. No regrets?" Sophia looked around the house that had become her home, thought about the man who had become her partner, considered the little girl who had become her daughter in every way that mattered. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Only gratitude for every choice that led me here." 2 years later, the March afternoon was perfect for a wedding, unseasonably warm with the kind of golden sunlight that made everything look like it was glowing. from within. In the small community garden behind Millbrook Heights Elementary School, 35 people had gathered to witness something beautiful and simple and true. Sophia Romano Thompson stood at the makeshift altar, wearing a cream-colored dress that Emma had helped her choose, elegant but not elaborate. The kind of dress you could actually move in, laugh in, live in. Her hair was pulled back simply, adorned with small white flowers that Emma had insisted matched the ones in her own hair, as maid of honor. James stood beside her in his best suit, the one he'd bought for parent-teacher conferences, but had never worn anywhere that mattered this much. His hands were steady as he held hers, his voice clear as he spoke the vows they'd written together during their weekly Sunday morning coffee talks. "Sophia," he said, "you came into our lives when we didn't even know we were waiting for you. You didn't just save Emma's heart in that operating room. You saved all our hearts by showing us what real love looks like. I promise to choose you every day, to support your dreams, and to build a life with you that's worth celebrating." 10-year-old Emma stood beside them, tears streaming down her face as she held the simple gold rings they'd chosen together. She'd grown 3 inches in the past 2 years and lost none of her scientific curiosity, though she'd added poetry and art to her interests. Her latest project was documenting the growth patterns in their expanded garden, which now took up most of their backyard. When it was Sophia's turn to speak, she looked first at James, then at Emma, then at the small gathering of people who had become their chosen family. Mrs. Chun, beaming from the front row, David Chun and his wife, several colleagues from the hospital, Emma's teacher Mrs. Henderson, and even a few neighbors who had watched their family grow and flourish. "James, 2 years ago I was running away from everything I thought my life was supposed to be," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I didn't know I was running toward everything I actually needed. You and Emma taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, choosing each other, and growing together. I promise to be your partner in all of it, the mundane Tuesday evenings and the exciting adventures, the small daily choices and the big life decisions." After they kissed and Emma whooped with joy, Mrs. Chun approached the microphone they'd borrowed from the school. "I've had the privilege of watching this family form over the past 2 years," she said, "and I can tell you that what you see here today isn't just a wedding. It's a celebration of people who chose love over fear, authenticity over expectation, and each other over everything else. James, Sophia, and Emma have created something beautiful together, and we're all better for witnessing it." The reception was held in the Thompsons' backyard, with Emma's science fair project on display alongside the wedding cake she'd helped bake. Tables were scattered across the lawn, filled with the kind of people who knew that the best celebrations weren't about expense, but about joy. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sophia found herself standing in the kitchen, washing dishes alongside James and Emma, just like any other family on any other day, except for the wedding dress and the ring on her finger. "Dr. Sophia Romano Thompson," Emma said, testing out the full name. "That sounds important." "All names are important when they belong to people you love," Sophia replied, ruffling Emma's hair. "Speaking of important," James said, drying a plate, "I got my acceptance letter from the university today. Official start date is August." Sophia turned to hug him, pride radiating from her smile. "James, that's wonderful. Education administration with a focus on family support services. You're going to change so many lives." "We're all changing lives," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Sophia saves people's hearts at the hospital. Dad's going to help families at school. And I'm going to be a pediatric cardiac surgeon who specializes in complex cases." At 10, Emma's goals had become more specific and ambitious. She volunteered with Sophia at the community health clinics, translating medical information for younger children. Her science projects consistently won awards, and her teachers had started consulting with Sophia about accelerated academic programs. Speaking of changing lives, Sophia said, I have news too. The community health program got approved for expansion. We're opening 3 new clinics in underserved areas, and the board asked me to head up the entire regional program. More responsibility? James asked. More opportunity to make a real difference, Sophia replied. And yes, better pay, which means we can finally finish the basement renovation and maybe take that family vacation to the marine biology center Emma's been requesting. As they finished cleaning up, Sophia caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror, no longer the polished, untouchable surgeon from 2 years ago, but someone who looked lived in and loved. Her hair was messy from dancing. Her dress had grass stains from playing with the neighborhood kids who'd crashed the reception, and her face was bright with genuine happiness. Do you ever miss it? Emma asked, following Sophia's gaze. The fancy life you had before? Never, Sophia said without hesitation. That life looked impressive from the outside, but it was hollow inside. This life, our life, it's real. Every messy, chaotic, beautiful moment of it. Later that night, after Emma had finally gone to bed still wearing her maid of honor dress because she was too excited to change, James and Sophia sat on their back porch, still in their wedding clothes, sharing a piece of leftover cake and watching the stars. 2 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be married to the woman who saved Emma's life, sitting in my backyard, eating wedding cake and planning our future together, I'd have thought they were crazy, James said. 2 years ago, if someone had told me I'd find my real family by running away from a $50 million wedding and climbing into a taxi driven by a single dad, I'd have had them committed, Sophia replied. They sat in comfortable silence, processing the magnitude of how much their lives had changed. The taxi was still parked in the driveway. James kept it for weekend work to help pay for his college expenses, but it no longer represented desperation or limitation. It represented the vehicle that had brought them together, the symbol of James's willingness to help someone in need. Sophia? James said eventually, yeah? Thank you for being brave enough to run toward us instead of away from everything else. Sophia leaned against his shoulder, looking at the house where they'd built their life together, windows glowing warmly, Emma's artwork visible through the kitchen window, the garden they'd planted together, thriving in the moonlight. Thank you for stopping, she said simply. For seeing someone who needed help and choosing to help them. For teaching me that home isn't a place. It's the people who choose to love you exactly as you are. Inside the house, Emma's voice drifted from her bedroom window as she talked to herself while organizing her medical journals, planning her next science project, dreaming out loud about the cardiac procedures she'd perform someday. It was the sound of a child who knew she was loved, supported, and capable of achieving anything she set her mind to. And outside, 2 people who had found each other in a moment of crisis sat together in the life they'd built from scratch. Not perfect, but real. Not prestigious, but authentic. Not what anyone else would have chosen for them, but exactly what they'd chosen for themselves. Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with the simplest acts of kindness. Sometimes the family you need finds you when you're brave enough to trust a stranger. And sometimes, the best life is the one you build together, one small loving choice at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.